James Mallory, and for some reason Eric Johnson, and it'll be led by Henrik. He'll be our moderator.
You want to roll over here?
I think let me use that chair without the jacket on.
Yeah, you need to move that.
Yeah.
You can just roll back to the future.
No, I was just saying so that we could move the jacket.
Whichever, you move it to see your jacket.
We don't want to see your jacket, sorry.
Right.
There's some logo.
No, when we got to the very end, you don't want to contrast with this.
Alrighty.
Well, thanks everyone. So our panel discussion is about editing, as Eric was mentioning. So why don't we start with our panel's name and your previous editing experience. So let's just start with James.
James Mallory, 30 plus years as a newspaper journalist. I retired as managing editor of the Atlanta Journal-Constitution.
Wow. My name is Lynn Hummel, and I've been a journalist for about the same, about 30 years. And I recently retired from the Bluffton Sun and the Hilton Head Sun as editor there.
And I've been a technical writer and editor for about the same amount of time. I started as a technical editor at Xerox, where it was prehistoric. We had a typesetting system, we had layout department, and we had the proofread galley and proofread all kind of stuff. So.
And I'm Henrik DeGeer, I'm just the moderator.
He's published how many books?
Yeah, we won't go there. Introductory statements on why editing is important. Go. Yes, go ahead.
Well, one is to have the most polished manuscript that you can produce. Again, as I said earlier when I was talking about the anthology, you want to put your best foot forward. You want to put out your best work. And the best way you do that is to make sure that you've edited it several times, and rewriting. We'll talk, I guess, later about rewriting, but that you've spent a lot of time rewriting your work.
And I'm going to piggyback on that because someone once told me the best writing is in rewriting. And that's not necessarily your writing, it might be the help of an editor that helps you notice where you might want to rewrite.
Yeah, in the corporate life as a tech writer, it was all about quality assurance. So they hired editors and proofreaders because things had to be translated in other languages. It had to be right, or we would spend a lot of money spinning our wheels. And in the creative writing world, you can't get things past agents that have errors in them, so it's frightening. Without editing and a lot of rewriting and proofreading, you're just not going to get anywhere.
No, notice just as a writer, you're blind to your own edits.
Yes.
I call it being nose blind.
Yeah. Even if you walk away and then come back to it shortly afterwards.
Right.
So when do we need to rewrite is the next question.
You all want to go first? Or
Go ahead. Go ahead, Eric.
Yeah, every time I write, I rewrite. So, I mean, stuff gets published and I start rewriting it. I don't even look at the few things I've had published. I have mentally started rewriting it. So it's almost, I think for most writers, it's a knee-jerk reaction to looking at your own words on paper. You just start trying to fix it.
Or at least you should. If you write it the first time, I don't know, it's almost as if the first time I write something, it's from just as the thoughts tumble out, pretty much like I'm speaking now. Just as the thoughts tumble out, you write it and you think it sounds really cool. And if you don't go back and read that, brush it up a little bit, take yourself out of it for a moment and read it as a reader as your audience. And that's very helpful for me, and I think for pretty much any writer.
I think, I mean, again, I'm gonna take a little different tack. I mean, I think you should also rewrite to reduce the number of words you have.
Simplify.
That's where to simplify your work. I think, you know, when you do your first draft, you may have sentences that are too long. You're using words that really don't work, and you know, you want to rewrite again. You're making it better. Can I get it? Is there a stronger word? Are there stronger verbs? Do I really need an adverb here? Does this even move my story forward, or is this just something I'm in love with? Especially in fiction writing. And I know myself, I was guilty of this. I am guilty of this, where you write things that you fall in love with, but it really doesn't matter to the story. And so it has to go. And that's when you go to rewrite, you want to take an eye to that and be willing to get rid of the things that you really love, because it's not helping your story. It may be cute, it may be great, but it's not making your story better.
But save it somewhere, because you might
Save
use
it,
it
you can
somewhere
use
else.
it somewhere else, but yeah.
So why do we need to hire an editor? Let's start with Eric.
Yeah, I was gonna say because they're indispensable. I don't know if that's the greatest answer,
Right.
but one of the things I loved about the Island Writers Network anthology that I was really excited about is we were assigned an editor, and James mentioned you have to be willing, you know, to cut things, and I had written a story about my brother getting a bow tie for Christmas when he was expecting and really wanted a wristwatch. So all throughout, in the early part of the story, I mentioned my older brother who really wasn't part of the story. And Susan said, you know, why is this guy in here? You know?
Too many characters.
Yeah, and he just had nothing to do. He had a little bit to do with the end of the story, but I mean, you know, it was just taking too long to ramp up to the real action of the story. And I said, okay, I just took it out, you know. And that's the kind of thing an editor, that's what makes them indispensable. You start out with something and, you know, you're within the word limit, but it doesn't have the impact it would have had if they just add impact and effectiveness to what story you're trying to tell.
Don't add filler.
Right, filler, extra words, like Strunk and White said, number one, remove extra words. Omit extra words, right. So, you know, and in my case, it's like James said, omit stories that you love. And I'm saying, well, you know, I gotta put this in here. My brother will read it. You know, sorry, dude, but somebody else has to tell you, you know, and that's the editor.
Beyond them.
Right.
Yeah, I get it.
I think it's important to have an editor because the editor is not as attached to your words
Right.
as you are.
Right.
And the editor is likely to notice little things that you might not have even thought about, like continuity. You're telling your story and you might get ahead of yourself or you might go backwards,
Right.
or an editor will help you with that continuity to make it sound better to the reader.
Since you said what I was going to say, I'll take a different tack again. I mean, I think when we say you want to hire an editor, you want to hire a good editor.
Yeah.
You want to hire somebody who knows what they're doing, but also somebody who's going to be honest with you. Somebody who's going to tell you you don't need your brother in that story, or you know you buried, like we used to say, you buried the lead. You know, you have all of this, but your story is like 6 paragraphs down.
Yes.
You need to move things around. You need to refocus that. And you need people who are going to be honest with you. Because again, you want your best work. And, you know, as writers, we're sensitive people. We don't like criticism. You know, we get hurt, our feelings get hurt easily. But your work is better sometimes when somebody hurts your feelings. In a nice way. In a nice way. Your work.
Keep going.
No, I just think that that's the kind of editor you want, is somebody who really is dedicated to help you make the work better. Can I make one other caveat? The other thing, that we should have mentioned earlier about editing, and a lot of this, we haven't talked about self-editing. In today's world, publishers don't think that they're going to have an editor sitting there waiting for your work to spend time with you. Odds are they don't. Even submitting to like a local magazine or a local publication. I mean, Lynn could talk to this more because she's more recent with it than I am. A lot of times, the copy editor don't even exist anymore, or they're working in Puerto Rico or out in the Philippines trying to look at your work. And so you have to learn to be a self-editor.
Yes.
To really try to catch a lot of the things that we're talking about on your own. And then if you find an editor who can work with you, they can help you improve the work also. But don't count on having somebody backstopping you anymore in this world of publishing.
So the idea of having all the different editors that we're about to talk about, so there's not just like one kind of editor.
No,
that we're going to
it
talk about.
it depends on process,
Oh, yeah.
or where you're at in the
Yeah.
process.
So before we go into all the different kinds of editing
Uh-huh.
in a second, you mentioned good editor, who's honest, who's going to give you feedback, who's I would suggest even removing the emotion from the equation, so that you get actually honest feedback that you take and embrace.
Right.
Is there anything else in the good editor that you would add to what James said?
Just being thorough. And I remember one tip you gave us in a mastermind class you were running, is that you can always test editors
Sure.
and give them the same page or two to edit and see, where you get the most feedback.
Yep, sure.
Because it's not going to cost you that much to have somebody edit a page or two. And at most pharmaceuticals, the editors are tested. So, they want to make sure people are thorough and find stuff.
Yep. Yep.
This is a funny thing that might help. I don't know if it will or not. A long time ago, I wrote a column in our newspaper, my column, and purposely put errors in it.
Nice.
Like 27
Yeah,
or
that's how they test
30 of them.
Yeah,
Wow.
good idea.
Just to see what the reaction of my readership would be.
Wow.
And at the end, I put a caveat, I hope it was April Fool's Day.
Right,
Oh,
right,
okay.
So-
right. Nice.
I guess that would be important, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
So, but I still put a caveat at the end, this is purposely done, blah, 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 and, whatever. And I got back pretty much just laughter and that was great and that was fun and whatever. But one lady, bless her heart, cut the thing out of the paper, red pen, everything, and
Good
sent a
one.
letter to my publisher that I should be fired. She could not believe that an editor would make that many
Bless her heart.
mistakes. And I still have that letter,
Of
but
course.
Meaning she didn't like the caveat you put that was April
She
Fool's
she
Day?
never got to
They
it.
never got that.
Right. Just give it
I
a
think
part.
she stopped about halfway through.
Right.
Yeah.
Mary Kelly.
Which is that's actually, even though she did it out of fun, it's a very good point, because if you want people to believe what you write and take you serious, that's why you also want to clean, because a lot of people are sitting there.
That's
If you
right.
have an error, a grammatical error, or what have you, they're not
They
going to
don't.
really believe anything else you have.
Right,
there.
you're done.
They're not going to get to the disclaimer. They're not going to
You're
get.
gonna lose them.
You're right.
And revisiting what Eric was saying about testing editors, I often hire two editors at the exact same time to read the exact same thing, or read two different parts of my book at the exact same time to give me the feedback and asking the right questions and giving me the right feedback that I'm expecting, because I'm going to be blind to my own edits and I expect 100 or 1,000 errors, right? Realistically speaking, that I completely miss as self-editing, right? And if they don't give it to me or they fail, next. And there's no emotion to it. It's just like, here's your fee if you actually did something, and then goodbye, and then next editor, and I just line them up, literally. I have no qualms in tossing editors if they don't serve me a purpose. And then I'll revisit them on a regular basis if they serve me well, because you'll know, right? But let's revisit, or actually let's go into all the different kinds of editing. So there was rewriting, copy editing, proofreading, developmental editing. What are all the different kinds of editing, and can we describe them verbally? Just, you wanna take some, go ahead, please.
I mean, development editing is someone who's going to help you structure your story and get it in where it's readable. That person is not the same as the person that's going to copy edit it. I would actually not recommend you have a development editor and who is copy editing. I would hire two different people for that. So a development editor would be, several of you all mentioned that you have stories that you're trying to formulate, and you want it, you might work with a development editor who helps you get the outline, help you organize it, help you get that story ready to go,
Right.
and maybe get you started
Yep.
on the writing process and get it formulated. So that would be the development editor. Who else did we have?
We have anything else on developmental editors that you guys?
No, that pretty much nails
Okay,
it.
we have proofreading, proofreaders.
Okay.
Well, that comes a little later.
Sure,
As,
okay.
as we talked about earlier, that's the copy editing
The copy
comes
is
first.
next.
Okay, yeah, so copy editing, you wanna talk about copy editing? Copy
That's
editing.
something that you can do a lot of yourself if you have a good command of the English language and paid attention in your grammar class. Get that Chicago style manual. And if we're not talking about news here, journalism here, but
Not AP, right? Is
you
that
have
AP?
one of those,
Is
of
that the
course
AP?
you do.
Yeah, that's the AP.
Yeah.
AP's taught
So,
right?
no Oxford comma there. And there are a few differences, and I'm learning more Chicago now because I am copy editing for a local magazine now. That is where they will go back in and put the commas before your quote, your ending quote marks, and capitalize words that need to be capitalized, and lowercase words that need to be lowercase, and that sort of thing. Sentence structure, repetitiveness, and that would be someplace where they might mark if you use the same word, 6 times in a paragraph or something like that. Things that, as you said, you don't see that on first read, and sometimes in your edit, because those are your words and you like them. So that's a little more intense, and then comes the proofreading.
Yeah.
And I would say on the copy editing also, a copy editor is also not just looking at grammar and punctuation and style, they're also looking at for things that may be libelous, something that can get you in trouble.
Sure.
Do you really want to use that word?
Yeah.
I think in today's world, with a lot of writing today, you have to be careful about gender, how you refer to gender, racial things. A good copy editor will at least flag that and ask you about it. Do you really want to say this? Is this really in context? So I would also I would look for a copy editor that I feel is comfortable doing that too.
Yeah. Use of song lyrics.
Use of song lyrics,
They know the rules.
the rules for that.
Not giving your source or giving them credit.
Yeah, but even if you give a source, sometimes you can
Right.
still.
Oh, true, yeah, like if you're violating copyright or trademark or whatever, yeah.
And something else that just occurred to me, and it might not be so much in prose writing, and probably not much in poetry, but a copy editor, and as a news copy editor, one thing that helped me, I believe, was knowing things about your community. If you're writing things about your community, where we live, and when the bridge was built, and when this and that and the other happened, and that sort of thing, just sort of not inherent knowledge, but learned knowledge being here for a long time. A good copy editor will catch those sort of things. I know that the Island Packet opened in 1970, the same year the hospital opened, those sorts of things. So if you're including any local information in your stories, then you want a local copy editor.
Yeah, and Jim had, Chicago style manual and stuff. If you're doing nonfiction tech writing, we had, there's a different style manual for
Is that APA?
there's the American Medical Association. I mean, there's MilSpec, you know, that, probably, yep, there's, Bell Labs had a very extensive and widely used style guide that they insisted
That's still
people
current,
use.
or that was a while back?
You know what? I bet the tech writers there are still using the Bell Labs style guide. You know,
And they changed, right? Like the
They do
APA
change.
changes every year.
They
or
change.
something?
They change a
to
lot.
update it.
So
yeah.
Associated Press changes every year.
They
Yeah,
change
right.
every year to update, and
Right.
you know,
They have to.
right,
Right.
they have to. You know,
How about
suddenly-
Chicago? Does Chicago evolve?
I'm not sure.
Okay.
I think the thing is that even with the style books, when they're updated, usually they're adding, like AP may say, well, you know, we don't say
Something super current, right?
super, you know, no, they may add something
Yeah,
super
right,
current,
right.
but the overall theme is the same year to year because, you know, you're not going to use the Oxford comma. That hasn't changed forever. But I mean, I know one year they went from when I was learning and writing, we did not spell out states. We used big G, little a for Georgia. And so there were some states you did spell out. Well, I understand now under AP style, you can spell out the state because, you know, a lot of stories and things are international. And an international person is not going to know what a GA is. So you would say
True.
Georgia,
Yeah,
Atlanta, Georgia.
that's true.
Yeah. So those are the kind of things that.
Yeah. Another one is percent.
Percent.
Mhm.
Okay.
Changed
They
3 years
changed
ago.
percent?
Yep.
Okay.
We can use the
Instead of
little
the
sign
symbol,
now.
You can look the sign now.
It used to be spelled out.
Right.
Oh,
Now
it's-
you can use the,
The symbol itself? Okay, got it. And then, anything more about rewriting, copy editing, proofreading, developmental editing, or any other kind of editing?
You know, proofreading is like, worth its weight in gold. This is the first anthology I ever got published in, and everything was great. I was so excited, you know. And I handed it to this little old lady at church. She read the first sentence. This tale begins in West Philadelphia, circa 1992, maybe 63. She said, Eric, you know, and I'm like, you know, really? And they messed up the proofreading somehow. I never saw the galley proofs or anything, you know, I was just happy to get the book. But
That's funny.
Anything else on this?
What did he say?
Sorry, was there a question?
Yeah, if you're taking questions.
Yeah, go ahead.
So, how do you find good editors, and have any of you ever used a cultural editor?
Oh, who?
Cultural.
Editor. You wanna define what a cultural editor does?
Someone who does look specifically at race or religion, or, you know, depending on what you may have going on in your piece, to make sure that it's appropriate, accurate, not offensive.
In the DEI sense or in the historical sense, or either?
Wow.
Yeah, or-
great
Yes.
idea.
Depending on what you need,
Say again?
depending on what you need.
Right, right.
I mean, you all may not agree with me. I mean, I think, I wouldn't not necessarily hire an editor to do that. You know, if I'm writing something that about women, I may have some women read what
That's
the
what
part
I
and
do.
say, does this work?
yeah, it's,
You know, if it's, you know, if you're writing something about race, is somebody that you trust, and you know, they happen to be of that race, ask them to read it and tell you. That's just how I see it. And you also have to be careful with that. For example, I mean, the novel I'm writing is based in 1975. I would not have a Generation G person read it for culture because my character is very much a sexist compared to what people think.
Which was a
So
normal
that,
back
that was normal back then, and so it wouldn't be there. So that's why I think.
It's normal now.
Well, no, no.
It's not right, but it's normal.
No, not, we're talking about writing it, but anyway, that's how I see it, I don't know how.
yeah, no, and the open workshop is great for that type of thing, because I have said to people, you know, you might wanna let a black woman read that,
Yeah.
because your description of the hairstyle,
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
You know, you might,
You
so,
did that last week.
I did that last week, didn't I? Yeah.
Which is the big
Remember?
thing
Might
with black
have
women.
differences
Hairstyles.
between
I mean, you know,
black men
maybe-
and black
maybe
women
he was
reading the
fine. I
same
don't know,
thing
but
and
I would
going yes
check.
or no.
Yeah, right.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's the other reason I like culture editors. They can't represent the whole
Right.
culture.
Yeah.
Right.
Richard?
Well, I have two questions. The second one is kind of sensitive, but the first one I'll ask. None of you actually spoke about writing for the audience, because if your book is about whatever it is about, then whether you're hiring an editor or you even in your own writing, self-correcting, do you ever in your writing think about who might be reading this?
Well, we are talking about editing now.
Yeah, we're talking.
Okay, we're not talking
That's
about
why,
the
that's why
audience.
we didn't
Yeah,
bring it up.
that is-
Yeah.
And that's the macro level that your
Yeah.
developmental edit
Yeah.
should define
Very
your
good.
target.
Should the
That's
editor
the-
know who the audience is to be
If
questioned?
they're doing a developmental edit,
They should
definitely.
ask you.
The
Yeah,
development.
they want to
Start
ferret,
basic questions,
they want to
right?
ferret that out, you know?
Right, is
Yeah.
it for a newspaper
Exactly.
or a book about the
Yeah.
seventies versus
Yeah, yeah,
a
yeah.
technical?
Okay, well,
Yeah.
fair enough. That's the
Yeah.
developmental.
Yeah,
That's-
yeah.
I was looking for that. So
No,
you
no,
got
no,
that right.
no, good
The
question.
second's a sensitive one, only because you guys use spell check on Word or no?
Oh, that's, yeah.
Do you? Grammar, spell check?
yeah, man.
For editing,
I
self-editing?
use everything
Actually, I was
can
gonna
get,
mention
yeah.
that.
Well, that's a form of AI. So what is this thing about the like AI? This is AI.
Yeah.
Siri is AI. So I know that we're talking about writing
Right.
our integral
Yeah,
self.
I also
So-
use the grammar checkers
Yeah,
too.
I use Grammar Check, I use
Hemingway.
Grammarly.
But you can't rely on it.
Yeah, I was
That's
gonna
exactly
mention
what
that.
I
Of
was
course
gonna
not.
say. You can use
It's a
it,
pass.
but
Yeah.
do not
Yeah.
rely on it.
Well, that's
Because it
that's
doesn't know the difference in words that are spelled the same but mean something
Right.
different.
or the context is different.
Or the
Yes.
context.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I mean, really what, is what we're saying is, you need to know grammar and punctuation if you're gonna use the AI software.
Sure.
And because a lot of them, if you really look at how they spell, I think they're all created in England, because they always use British spelling a lot of times for things when
Yeah, can you change that?
when they change things. And a lot of times the punctuation, it may not understand. Grammarly drives me crazy with ellipsis.
Oh God.
You put an ellipsis in it, it's gonna tell you
Yeah, it's
that you got a
upsetting.
grammar
Yeah,
problem.
it ticks them off, yeah,
Yeah.
because it's repetitive.
Yeah.
The repeating of the,
Couple more questions and then we're gonna have to wrap it up.
Yeah.
Recasting sentences, paragraphs and chapters. Someone have something to say about that?
For an editor,
Sure.
sometimes I think that's very helpful, but when you get to that point, I'm not sure that an editor should have that final word on something like that. I would
The
point that-
division of,
Yes,
Okay.
if it's something that just reads wrong to the editor, that would be something you would point out to your writer, don't just change it.
oh, so you're not dividing the sentences or chapters or that?
Wait,
Is that what you're saying?
no.
The editor is not?
No,
doing it?
well, I'm not
Yeah, yeah, of course,
necessarily,
yeah,
but
yeah, of course, yeah.
maybe I misunderstood.
Yeah,
Read the question
maybe, yeah,
again.
read it quick, cause I don't.
So that's how I read the question, is recasting sentences or paragraphs or chapters.
Is that what the writers should do, or are you asking if the editor should do?
Whose job is it? Is it the writer's job to do that?
Well, I would say first of all, you should look at your work in that sense, for your self-editing to recast sentences, cut sentences. By the time you get to the editor, you all should have a dialogue about what you want the editor to do. For example, one of my clients is a German journalist, and a lot of her work she translates, and she will send me a note saying, I want you to do a line edit and rewrite to make it clear if you need to. But you may get somebody else who you just want them to copy edit your work or look for holes and what have you. And you may say, but send any changes you suggest, give me suggested changes. Don't rewrite my work. The person I work with, we've worked together long enough, she says, have at it. And if it's something I still feel uncomfortable with, I'll send it back with a note. I don't understand this, and I don't want to change I don't want to change where I'm changing the meaning of what you're trying to say.
No, you brought up line editing because, sorry.
Okay, question?
I just wanted to add that, that editing is my day job,
Right.
but it's kind of the industry standard to use the Microsoft Word review tool. And we'll do that with the anthology as well. And so, the way I've always learned to do it, and the way I do it with any of my clients, is I use the review tool. If I have an idea of how I think a sentence might be more effective, I'll do that, but then that shows up in red, and that doesn't change their manuscript. When they get then I send that back to them, they have to go
Can accept
down
or reject
through their
it.
manuscript
Yeah.
again, and they're gonna
Right.
see every
Accept.
single suggestion I made in a different color, and they can either accept it or decline it.
Which is helpful for the writer, to see
Right.
their mistakes.
So they have the choice every single time to accept it or decline it. And with my own books, I have an editor at my publisher that's editing my things. And they're doing the same thing to me, and, most of what they suggest, I probably do accept, but not everything. The author does have the final word, and, really, whatever an editor is doing there should just be a suggestion.
Right.
So is it typically that you're suggesting and doing similar suggestions versus actually moving, aside from being on deadline, minor detail?
Like I said, with the one of my clients, she gives me the carte blanche, but most aren't gonna do that.
Okay,
Yeah.
so it's just a suggestion?
Yeah, but that's something you should have that conversation with the editor, is what I'm saying, before you get into the process.
Yeah, because back to the coaching, if I know that I keep doing this mistake,
Right.
I learn from it, but if you edit it for me and I'm
Right.
blind to that, to
Right.
your edit,
Right.
then I don't learn anything, fair?
And I will say, if you're writing for a newspaper or for a magazine, you don't have that luxury. The
Right.
editor is on a deadline, you probably turned it in late anyway.
Yeah.
We've
It's
got
due, like, in
6
an hour.
minutes before it has to go to the printer, so
Right.
it's gonna be edited, no questions asked.
Got it. One last question, modes of discourse, you wanna talk about that?
Modes of discourse.
What are the modes of discourse?
What do you mean by
Yeah.
that?
Yeah.
That was a
I
question that
looked
was
it
out
up.
earlier.
Translate that.
Hold on.
Ways
Tool for
to
this,
talk?
Ellen.
For example, stuff like dialogue and teaching
Yes,
monologue,
correct.
making those choices.
Yeah, pretty much,
and
yeah.
How you're going to approach your text.
Yeah, classical rhetoric
And if
stuff.
someone has made a decision to say, write story in dialogue, and you're the editor, and you read it and
Okay.
go, this isn't working this way,
Mm.
how do you decide what to suggest for an edit?
Okay.
That's a deep edit, sounds
Yeah,
like to
that's
me.
a deep- yeah, it's a
that-
deep
That
But that would
sounds
be
like it
common
needs
in
to
fiction,
be,
to your point, right?
Yeah.
Is that fair? Yeah.
I mean, it's a good point, but I mean, does that get into point of view also? Or-
I think so.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's part of the development editing process too. Are you, which point of view, are you gonna use first person, third person combination? What kind of voice you're gonna have. Dialogue is a little different for me. Like even, a lot of times when I edit quotations to make sure that the style is right and it works. But a lot of times, if that's how people want it to say, I work with them to make sure it fits in with where they're going with their story. Yes.
One thing that I've noticed that I find interesting is you're talking about quotations and stuff. Is I've bought some books and they've been shipped in from Australia, say, and I've noticed their grammar rules are slightly different than ours.
Yeah.
We use the 2 little notches for
Right.
quotations; they use just 1.
Right.
And I just found that very interesting,
Yeah.
and it hadn't occurred to me before. So, if you have someone who writes if you're, an American author and you get an Australian editor, there may be some issues
There'd
there,
be some issues, yeah.
Spelling.
or vice versa.
Yeah.
And nowadays, that's more common, like
Yeah.
James was saying, editors are all over
They're all
everything,
over
because
it,
everything is done
Yeah.
virtually.
But a good editor should understand that. We actually had that issue with an anthology,
Okay.
where we had an editor who grew up in the British culture. And when we said we're using standard American English, that person was really offended. That it was not a good party. Because she wanted to put that U in honor.
Of course.
Or that
Right.
you and labor.
Or
And we
the
say,
Lion tire.
no, because we have to be consistent.
Right.
So I mean,
Yeah.
that is a very good point. But again, I think that's having that relationship with that editor. A good editor, if they're in Australia, New Zealand, or whatever,
They
they're
know.
working with American, they understand.
They know.
They should.
And that's for that audience.
So that's a
We had
dialogue.
22 different.
That's a, yeah,
Between writer and editor.
Right.
Makes sense.
Yeah,
We got a vote, but thank you so much.
okay.
Round of applause for our panel.